Okay. Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions will come to order. We will now return to consideration of the following bills: S. 1067, Ensuring Timely Access to Generics Act of 2023, S. 1114, Expanding Access to Low-Cost Generics Act of 2023, S. 1214, the RARE Act, and S. 1339, the Pharmacy Benefit Management Reform Act. For the awareness of all senators and staff, we intend to roll all votes until the end. We will stay in touch with you and your staff with timing updates. And I am hopeful that we will begin voting before the first vote series on the floor. I am pleased to report, at least at last discussion, that Ranking Member Cassidy and I have reached an agreement on a set of ground rules for this markup. First, as all of you know, every member on this committee, of course, has a right to file amendments, had a right to file amendments to the bills that we have noticed by 8 p.m. last night. Now, there may be a senator who offers an amendment that I like or that Ranking Member Cassidy likes. But if we believe that an amendment is fatal to the bipartisan adoption of this package in committee or on the floor, we have agreed to table those amendments at this time. And let me be very clear, that does not mean that we will not, or I will not, work with you in the future to advance your legislation. This is not the last prescription drug markup that we will be having. Our job right now is to move this package out of committee, pass it with more than 60 votes in the Senate, and work with our colleagues in the House to get it signed into law. That is the mission. During this markup, Ranking Member Cassidy and I have agreed that we will not support an amendment that, one, does not have a CBO score, and two, has not received technical assistance. If an amendment does not rise to the level of fatal, and the sponsor of the amendment asks for a vote, Ranking Member Cassidy and I will vote based on how we feel about that particular amendment. And let me take this moment, I don't know if everybody here knows it, but both the Republican staff and the Democratic staff have been working, hour after hour after hour on this thing. And I just want to commend all of the staff on both parties for their very hard work. Let me also thank every senator here today who has introduced legislation that will be marking up or as an amendment that they intend to offer to make this package even better. I would like to ask my colleagues to limit your remarks to 2 minutes. And when recognized, please specify the bill and the amendment number that you are offering and speaking on. Since procedurally we are in a continuation of the markup from May 2nd, the unanimous consent agreements adopted last week still stand. Namely, the quorum rule is waived for purposes of speaking on the amendments and bills only, and the manager's amendments to S. 1067, S. 1114, and S. 1339 have been adopted and are considered base text for purposes of amendments. Senator Cassidy, floor is yours. Would you like to make an opening statement before we proceed?
Please. I first also want to begin by thanking staff, both for my staff, Senator Sanders' staffs, but all of your staffs as well. Y'all, we've worked really hard. They've worked even harder. And I just want to thank them because I think we're going to come up with a product that, that although last week revealed how sausage is made, and it was pretty messy, on the other hand, the final sausage is going to taste pretty good, to pursue the metaphor. We've worked on a bipartisan solution to lower cost. I can say that lowering the cost to families of drugs, prescription drugs, has been a bipartisan concern. And this is our mission. We're here to lower healthcare costs, to improve access to the best possible care for fellow Americans. And the legislation we're considering today to reform the rules that govern PBMs and generic drugs does that. Now, PBMs have been criticized for their role in contributing to higher costs of prescription drugs, and they are a major player. Middlemen between multiple parties, employees, patients, pharmacies, manufacturers, and others. And the current concern has been if they've used this position as middlemen to pick drugs that serve their bottom line and the patient and the sponsor pay. But I can say, I have no doubt that the people who run those companies are well-meaning people. And in my years in the medical community, I've learned that there's far more bad incentives driving bad behavior than bad actors. And those incentives are things that we're attempting to address. The profit motive has played a major role in the creation of numerous life-saving drugs, but a market without transparency is dysfunctional. Patients should know what they're expected to pay, and employers have the ability to shop around for the best deal. Today's PBM legislation is at its core about improving transparency. One thing that we haven't really talked about, but one of the provisions in here would actually have a cover sheet when you get a mortgage. And you get a mortgage, it tells you what your principal is, what your interest rate, and how much you're going to eventually pay for interest. We have that kind of enabled here. So the small business that doesn't have the ability to afford a third-party auditor can look at that cover sheet and get a sense. I can compare this plan to that plan to that plan, just as I can compare a mortgage from this bank to that bank. A real shout out to Kevin Schulman, a Stanford MD who works on all this. It was his suggestion, and it's just an example of how Americans around the country have kind of taken an interest in this and pitched in to make our product better. And so we've got multiple drugs that are going to speed lower cost generic drugs coming to market to prevent gamesmanship, to prevent abuse of the citizens petition process, to speed generic drugs to market by preventing the parking of 180-day exclusivity, and to change the orphan drug exclusivity to align with the scope of FDA approval, which would allow more drugs for rare diseases to come to market. You know, our colleague Angus King once said, there is no silver bullet when lowering the cost of prescription drugs, but there's silver buckshot. There is a lot of buckshot in this bill. And the solutions we consider today are examples of how we can lower drug prices without threatening the incentives to produce the life-saving drugs of the future. I thank Chair Sanders and the rest of you for collaboration, and I look forward to today's markup.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator Cassidy. Okay, we will now restart consideration of the bills from the top as listed on the notice, which means we will start with S. 1067, the Ensuring Timely Access to Generics Act of 2023. Do any members wish to speak or offer an amendment to S. 1067? I don't see anybody. Okay. Thank you. That concludes consideration of S. 1067. We are on our way. We will now move to S. 1114, the Expanding Access to Low-Cost Generics Act of 2023. Do any members wish to speak or offer an amendment to S. 1114?
Mr. Chair?
Senator Hassan.
Well, I want to thank you and the ranking member for your work on this important legislation and echo my thanks to the staff on both sides of the aisle. Mr. Chairman, to clarify where things stand on my amendments, last week I offered 3 amendments to S. 1214, the RARE Act. At the appropriate time, I will withdraw my previous 3 amendments from consideration on S. 1214. For consideration today, I will now offer Hassan Amendment Number 1 as modified to S. 1114. This amendment would incorporate my bipartisan bill with Senator Paul, the Increasing Transparency in Generic Drug Applications Act, into S. 1114, the Expanding Access to Low-Cost Generics Act. As I noted in last week's session, this amendment will help lower prescription drug prices and bring needed financial relief to patients by getting generics to the market faster. Delays to in the launch of generic drugs deprive patients of significant savings that come with market competition, and our amendment will curb unnecessary delays by months or years. I'd like to thank my co-sponsors, Senator Paul, Braun, and Hickenlooper, for their continued partnership. I'd also like to thank the ranking member for his collaboration in reaching a strong bipartisan agreement on this legislation. We had differences in opinion, sat down with our teams, and reached an agreement to move this policy forward. Over the last week, we worked together to ensure that this bipartisan bill eliminates the guessing game around inactive ingredient amounts, while also adding protections to ensure that only generic manufacturers with an impending application can receive this information from the FDA. As a result, we are one step closer to bringing lower drug prices to patients and reducing the federal deficit by nearly $1 billion over 10 years. I thank the chair and ranking member for their support, and I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. I'll ask for a vote at the appropriate time. And with regard to the other two amendments, although I will not be offering other amendments, I'd like to briefly mention these two bills with Senator Braun that increase access to generic drugs, the Ensuring Access to Generic Medications Act and the Increasing Prescription Drug Competition Act. These bills would close two additional loopholes that manufacturers currently use to block generics from entering the market. I will not offer my amendments Hassan number 2 or number 3 today, but I am committed to working in a bipartisan manner to stop manufacturers from gaming the system. I look forward to continuing to work on this legislation with Senator Braun and the ranking member, and I will withdraw those amendments at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much, Senator Hassan. Any other discussion on this amendment?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Braun.
so what we did yesterday, it was clear that there's a lot of room for improvement when it comes to transparency in everything about our current system, which looks so complicated. Don't know exactly what we distilled out of that conversation, other than if you can't agree on transparency and competition, get rid of the barriers to entry, we're never going to make much progress. And I wish those two amendments would be brought forward and we would take a vote on it, but understand the mechanics of this business as well. But until we get transparency and we get competition, expect more of the same.
Thank you. Senator Cassidy?
Yeah, let me thank Senators Hassan and Paul for their work on the policy. Let me thank Senator Kane, because this is when last week things broke down and Kane said, listen, we're losing votes for things that we could have more votes for. And I will say in this intervening week, we have worked to get this in a place where we can all be happy with. Putting in, from my perspective, putting in important safeguards on the sharing of proprietary information and to protect this new pathway from abuse. I think the bill strikes the right balance to help get lower-cost generic drugs to market faster. It prevents, and I thought Senator Paul put it very eloquent last week, but I'll rephrase it. This will prevent generic drug companies from having to play a game of battleship with FDA over the recipe of their products. I understand that several of my Republican colleagues have expressed concerns. While I support this amendment, I do appreciate the members who have thoughtfully expressed their concerns. On Hassan's 2 and 3, I again thank Senator Hassan and Senator Braun and others for their work. But as we have worked towards this, it didn't seem as if this was quite ready to go. And so I appreciate their work to increase generic competition and to strike the right balance. But as I said, we just could not quite get there through the technical process.
Thank you, Senator Cassidy. Further discussion? Let me just say that I support, I concur with Senator Cassidy. I think where we are today is in a better place, actually, than where we were last week. I support the Hassan-Paul amendment, and I thank both of them for their hard work. This amendment would help bring low-cost generics to patients faster. It would allow FDA to share information that generic manufacturers need about how the inactive ingredients in their drugs compared to brand name medicines. CBO estimates that this bill would save taxpayers $968 million. I urge a yes vote on this amendment. Okay. That concludes consideration of S 1114. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Smith, did you want to say a word?
Thank you, Chair Sanders and Ranking Member Cassidy. I'd just like to take a moment to talk about the underlying bill expanding access to low-cost generics act, which is my bipartisan bill with Senator Braun. I'm really grateful for your partnership on this. Our bill would address the problem of parking. This is a practice where a brand name manufacturer agrees not to sue the first company that submits an application to create a generic version of that drug, the so-called first filer, as long as that generic company agrees to delay bringing that drug to market. So this is anti-competitive. This parking behavior creates a bottleneck in the number of generic products available on the market, and it drives up costs. So our bill would allow subsequent filers of that generic application the ability to receive 180-day market exclusivity after a specified time frame. It essentially undermines this agreement between the brand name drug and the first filer to block other generic drugs out of the market. I've worked with Senator Braun on this legislation. It would change the incentive structure so that companies are rushing to bring drugs to market rather than parking their market exclusivities. This policy proposal has strong bipartisan support. It has been included in both President Biden and former President Trump's formal budget requests for the FDA. And CBO estimates that this policy will generate $1.3 billion in savings over 10 years, demonstrating that this bill would lower out-of-pocket costs for consumers. And I urge my colleagues to support this bill.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion?
I'll comment unless Senator Braun wants to go first.
I'm sorry? Senator,
Okay. I thank Senator Smith and Braun for their work. I think it will help speed more low-cost generic drugs to market. It's a delicate balance that will help more generic products come to market in a timely way, but it also protects the 180-day exclusivity as an important incentive and as a driver of generic competition.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Braun.
Thank you, Ranking Member, and a pleasure to work on something like this. And glad to see that it's caught stride, and we just need more of this as much as we can through further markups and to keep going down this trail. So enjoyed doing it with you.
Good. Further discussion? I don't see any. That concludes consideration of S 1114. Now we're moving on to S 1214, the RARE Act. Are there any members who wish to speak or offer an amendment to S 1214?
Mr. Chair.
Senator Hassan.
Thank you. I just wanted to formally withdraw Hassan number 2 and Hassan number 3 from S 1214.
Okay. Further discussion? All right. Senator Cassidy, you good? All right, that concludes consideration of S 1214. We're now moving on to S 1339, the Pharmacy Benefit Managers Reform Act. Are there any members who wish to speak or offer an amendment to S 1339? Senator Paul?
This is Paul Amendment 1. Mr. Chairman, PBM rebates are a complex subject. We're told that PBMs are middlemen who drive up drug prices, but insurance companies hire PBMs to do the opposite, to negotiate with drug companies to lower prices. The drug company wants to sell high, the insurance company wants to buy low. PBMs use their bargaining power to drive prices down, not up. The real problem with drug prices is that consumers are removed from what their drugs cost, so they aren't price conscious. There's no market signal for what consumers would willingly pay, so the only downward pressure on what drug makers will charge comes from PBMs. This bill bans spread pricing, which small businesses and startups often choose because the PBMs take on the additional risk for themselves. The big three PBMs have a diversified business model, but some smaller PBMs depend on spread pricing for over 90% of their business. Banning these contracts may actually put smaller PBMs out of business and make the big three bigger. So instead of punishing or restricting the big PBMs, you may actually be making them stronger with this legislation. So maybe we should ask, who is this bill supposed to help? Big Pharma loves this bill. Big Pharma would love to weaken PBMs. They are their adversary in the marketplace because PBMs counteract the size and bargaining power of Big Pharma. In a recent op-ed in the Washington Times, it was pointed out that this bill also helps the biggest three drug wholesalers. 3 of the 15 wealthiest companies in America who control 90% of the prescription drug supply will benefit by taking the PBMs out of the equation. Drug companies want to maximize their sales, and they offer rebates, so PBMs will put their drugs on the plan's formulary, where it will reach the most patients. But why use rebates at all? Why not offer the discounts up front as they once were? The reason is a Depression-era antitrust law called Robinson-Patman, which makes it illegal for anyone who sells commodities to offer different prices based on who they are selling to. The FTC hasn't really enforced this law in 40 years, but since it's on the books, it still affects the market behavior. In 1994, this changed dramatically with a lawsuit. A group of pharmacies filed a class action suit under Robinson-Patman against the big drug companies for not giving the pharmacies the same discounts that they gave to HMOs. HMOs got the discounts because they could influence which doctors prescribe and influence behavior. As part of the settlement, the drug companies were allowed to offer discounts, but only retroactively after a buyer showed the ability to move market share. That's how we got the rebate system. The rebate system isn't a function of the marketplace, it's a function of this lawsuit and this antitrust law. That's why we have this bizarre, opaque thing that everybody complains about. So instead of removing the primary cause, we want to add regulations to this, which will further complicate it and may have unintended consequences. I say let's remove the primary cause. Could I have unanimous consent to have one more minute? I
Without
won't speak
objection.
anymore on this.
Go ahead. Go.
So why is the pharmaceutical industry now trying to get rid of rebates? Well, if we eliminate rebates but keep Robinson-Patman in place, the PBMs will basically be disarmed. They will have less power and less leverage against the drug companies. Drug companies will point to the risk of antitrust lawsuits as an excuse not to offer upfront discounts. And since the bill in front of us will make rebates to the PBMs less able to do this, there won't be any market check on drug prices. When that happens, just imagine the outcry we'll have for more government price controls in the ensuing years. The alternative is to let PBMs do their job. There are plenty of ways they could do it without rebates, but only if Congress repeals Robinson-Patman first. That's what my amendment would do, to repeal the first cause of all of this mess, of all of the rebate system, which is the Robinson-Patman Act.
Okay, thank you, Senator Paul. Let me just jump in and say Senator Paul raises some interesting issues, which I look forward to dealing with in the future. Unfortunately, Senator Paul's amendment would repeal, as he just mentioned, the Robinson-Patman Act of 1936, which is a federal antitrust law intended to prevent price discrimination. We have consulted with a parliamentarian, and it is my determination that this amendment lies in the Judiciary Committee's jurisdiction and would be in violation of Rule 15 of the Standing Rules of the Senate. Accordingly, I rule it out of order.
So,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, that means you will not be allowing a vote,
It's not within the jurisdiction of the committee.
but that's, your ruling is that there will not be a vote allowed.
Correct. Okay, but it is an issue that I look forward to working with you on. Further discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Romney.
I call up Romney Amendment Number 2. As you know, this legislation prohibits spread price contracting. My amendment would preserve the option for employers to consider spread price contracts, but would require PBMs to also present a plan sponsor with at least one non-spread price contract. A vast majority of small and middle-sized employers prefer spread price contracting because it's lower cost and more certainty for them. That's why they choose it. Making that illegal is not going to help small or mid-sized businesses. Our understanding as well is that the majority of unions also prefer spread price contracting. So my amendment allows spread price contracting to be offered to employers and unions, but it also says that the PBM has to provide a non-spread price option as well. I would note that when infused with transparency that this amendment provides, spread pricing will provide employers predictability, risk mitigation, and encourage broader access to low-cost generics. Prohibiting spread pricing will not save sponsors money. The CBO reported that this amendment, by the way, does not add or reduce the deficit. Instead, it could well result in PBMs increasing the amount of service fees. So as a result, I am very much in favor of allowing, if you will, consenting entities, unions, employers, and PBMs to enter into the contracts they think provide them the lowest cost and the greatest degree of certainty. At the same time, insisting on more transparency such that the entities will see an option which is a non-spread pricing option and will be able to choose between them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Romney. Further discussion? Is Senator, I'm sorry. Okay. This amendment, Senator Romney's amendment, would create an exception to the PBM bill's ban on spread pricing. I'm concerned that this amendment would allow PBMs to continue to profit by charging employers and plans more for a drug than they pay the pharmacy. Under the agreement that I made with Ranking Member Cassidy, at the appropriate time, I will make a motion to table this amendment. Senator Cassidy.
I understand Senator Romney's concern, and we want to be mindful, absolutely, of the plan sponsors. But when we speak to the employers, we don't get the same impression that they're supportive of this, or that they're even aware that spread pricing is part of their contract. I have 2 letters to submit for the record, one signed by 40 business groups and the other by the National Federation of Independent Businesses, in which both advocate eliminating spread pricing. Now, on a kind of different note, though, philosophically understand where you're coming from, and we, I'm told, did work with your staff to try and get it into a place where technically it could work, and that was difficult to do. It was just, we could not do it prior to this hearing. So that said, I will join in opposing the amendment.
Further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would note that we spoke with the NFIB, and they are not, in fact, supportive of a full ban on spread pricing. They support limitations on spread pricing, which is precisely what my amendment does. There's no question, but the entities would like to be able to have a choice. And that's what my amendment does, which is allow spread pricing to exist for those that want it, but they must also be given an option of a non-spread pricing alternative. So it gives them exactly what this bill wants to do. It gives them transparency and a non-spread pricing alternative. But if they, and by the way, talk to unions. Unions want spread pricing because they want the certainty that spread pricing provides. And it is lower cost for them than the alternative. So banning spread pricing is going to increase costs for many small businesses, not all, and for many unions. So why not let them, again, why not let consenting entities decide what's the best contract for them, instead of having us as government step in and say, you can't contract the way you want to. What I'm saying is, you can contract the way you want to, but the PBM has to give you at least one alternative, which is not spread pricing. So you get to make the comparison.
Senator Paul.
I think Senator Romney makes a great point, and we need to realize people are all consumed with, we want to lower prices, and we all do, but realize what this bill does. This bill takes away choices. So there is a choice in the marketplace between spread pricing and pass-through. Every company has it. You're going to take this choice away, and he's exactly right. Some labor unions actually like this choice and choose this. Some small businesses do. In fact, the PBMs compete on this model. The smaller PBMs absorb more risk and offer a cheaper product, which is the spread pricing. Small businesses choose it on price, and the smaller PBMs do it to try to take away market share from the bigger PBMs. So what this bill should be called is the consolidation of the PBM market to enhance the monopolization of the PBM trade, because that may be what happens here. So I don't think we're being thoughtful on this. It's why we should probably vote this down completely and start over and have a discussion over the next year how we could lower prices, because this, in all likelihood, is going to have the opposite effect by banning something. But the ultimate thing it does here is it bans choice.
And if I may,
Senator Cassidy.
I think we're being incredibly thoughtful. The Express Script testimony said in their demonstration projects that when they did non-spread pricing but directly fee-based, that they actually lowered costs for the plan sponsor. This idea was first brought to me by a smaller PBM, who, and I think I quoted their fee yesterday, which is a lower fee than the spread pricing, which has been documented to be both in the Part D, and which I'm told is, although this has not been researched, in the commercial market. I will again go back to this letter in which the 40 different business groups say that most companies are not aware that they are even getting a contract with spread pricing. And lastly, on the part of thoughtfulness, if you look at the fully insured market, the two are integrated. The PBM is integrated with the overall insurance plan. It's vertically integrated. So by increasing the cost of drugs, the overall plan is able to manipulate their medical loss ratio so as to kind of constrict it. So there's different ways in which that integrated PBM and insurance company arbitrage these drug prices to otherwise increase price for increased price. You don't have to believe me. When Express Scripts talked about it, they talked about how when they did not use Express pricing, there was a 3.5% decrease in overall drug costs. That was their testimony.
Further discussion on Romney number 2? Okay, moving on. Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, procedurally, I would like to withdraw Baldwin Amendment 1 to S 1339 and offer Baldwin Amendment 1 as modified. The Fair Drug Pricing Act, which I have introduced with Senator Braun, passed out of this committee as an amendment back in 2019 with bipartisan support, and I look forward to the same outcome later today. As I stated last week, our amendment would require drug companies to provide a transparency and justification report 30 days before raising the price of a drug by more than 10% in a single year or more than 25% over a 3-year period. The text before us, as it's being distributed today, improves upon the work that we did back in 2019 and incorporates technical assistance from Health and Human Services and the Food and Drug Administration. According to the Congressional Budget Office, the Fair Drug Pricing Act would not impact the deficit. Over a dozen states have passed some form of legislation requiring drug companies to report more information in their pricing practices. And I recognize that this has created a patchwork of state laws, and I'm committed to working on this issue with Ranking Member Cassidy as this bill moves to the floor. American taxpayers are footing the bill for the rising costs of drugs, and it is only fair to call on drug companies to share more information about why they are increasing prices for the drugs that our constituents depend upon. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I want to extend my thanks to Ranking Member Cassidy for his continued work and partnership on this.
Further discussion on the Baldwin and Braun amendment.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Braun.
so this ought to be the lowest hanging fruit that we should get through on a day like this. I won't repeat what the senator has said, but I would hope that all Republicans and Democrats on this committee would vote for something that is simple as this. It's about transparency. We need more of it. We found that out yesterday. Urge everyone to vote for it here later on. Thank you.
Further discussion. Senator Cassidy.
I want to thank Senator Baldwin for continuing to work with me on this amendment. An important point of reference in this conversation is that at least 18 states have enacted varying laws on drug price transparency reporting requirements. Red states, blue states, my home state of Louisiana, have acted in the absence of Congress legislating on this issue. However, if we enact Senator Baldwin's legislation, it would establish a federal reporting requirement that may conflict with the numerous other reporting requirements that already exist today. That would be hard to comply with and result in patients not getting the clearest information. I am not opposed to a federal reporting requirement for drug price transparency with the appropriate guardrails, but we should make sure that there isn't an unnecessary administrative burden that could have the unintended consequence of driving up compliance costs that are ultimately passed to the patient. I'd like to ask Senator Baldwin if she would agree to continue to work with me to see if we can find a way forward on preempting the patchwork of state laws and look to streamline the drug transparency reporting requirement before this reaches the Senate floor.
As I proffered in my statement just a moment ago, I look forward to working with you on the issue of a path forward on the various states who have enacted transparency and justification reports, and believe that our track record already in looking at this bill and this amendment and resolving issues should give us encouragement that we'll be able to do that by the time it reaches the floor.
I thank Senator Baldwin. Look forward to continuing to work together. With this agreement, I plan to support Baldwin number 1 when we proceed to votes later this morning.
Senator Paul?
I have Paul amendment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rand. Let me just say a word on this one. I support Senator Baldwin's amendment, and I thank her for agreeing to modify it. This amendment is simple, straightforward. It will require pharmaceutical companies to disclose research and development costs, profits, and marketing expenses whenever they substantially increase the price of prescription drugs. According to a report from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the pharmaceutical industry increased the price of more than 1,200 prescription drugs July 2021 to July 2022. The Baldwin-Braun amendment tells the big drug companies, who combined made over $100 billion in 2021, that if they're going to substantially raise the price of prescription drugs, they have got to disclose to the American people the justification for those price hikes. I urge a yes vote on this amendment. Any further discussion on it? Senator Paul.
I offer Paul Amendment 2. Like the chairman, I believe in the power of collective bargaining. While I'm against firing workers who don't want to pay union dues, I do think there's a place for collective bargaining in a free market. People ought to be allowed to freely associate and leverage their economies of scale as long as it's voluntary and no one's coerced. Under the National Labor Relations Act, labor unions and union members are excluded from the federal antitrust laws as long as they are instituted for the purposes of mutual help. I actually think the NLRB got it right here. There is value in voluntary mutual help, and the law should recognize that. And I think we should extend the same principle to groups that have to negotiate with PBMs. One complaint I often hear about PBMs is that they're just too big and powerful, so the small pharmacies don't have a chance to get their fair contract terms from them. The argument makes a lot of sense. Now, there are already groups that collectively bargain for community pharmacies. They're called Pharmacy Service Administrative Organizations, and most of the small pharmacies use them. The problem is there's too many of them, they're too dispersed across the country to have real leverage. Over 80% of the community pharmacies use PSAOs, but every state in the union has at least 3 of them, and some have 8 or 9. When you compare that to the PBM market, where the PBMs account for over 230 million lives, it's easy to see the imbalance in the negotiation. My amendment would fix this problem by extending the same antitrust treatment that currently applies to labor unions, also to pharmacies, hospitals, and healthcare professionals. Any combination of these groups could band together and bargain collectively on the private market without fear of antitrust prosecution, as long as their combined book value is smaller than the PBM they're negotiating with. This amendment is modeled on a bill that passed the House of Representatives by a vote of 276 to 136 at the end of the Clinton administration. The chairman at that time, when in the House, was actually a supporter of this. The original bill only applied to healthcare professionals, so pharmacies would be added to it. But I think given the problems of our community pharmacists and many of our rural hospitals are facing with negotiating with PBMs, they deserve to be included as well. As a physician, I say if physicians deserve this kind of protection, don't pharmacists deserve it also? I ask for your support.
Thank you. Let me just say this again. I understand that Senator Paul is offering this amendment in order to empower independent pharmacies to negotiate together against PBMs and get better rates. He would do this by amending our nation's antitrust laws. We have consulted with the parliamentarian, and it is my determination that this amendment lies in the Judiciary Committee's jurisdiction and would be in violation of Rule 15 of the standing rules of the Senate. Accordingly, I rule it out of order.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Paul.
I understand the chairman's prerogative and the power to rule this out of order. The chairman also has the power to rule it in order and allow a vote on it. To have a debate over such a grand issue and silo off the different possible reforms and say, oh, we're going to fix it by not fixing the primary problem because that's in another committee's jurisdiction, I think isn't a rational way to approach these problems. And in the end, you may well get the unintended consequences of thinking you're doing something to the marketplace while not fixing first causes and ultimately making the situation worse. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Okay, are there other amendments?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman,
We had
Mr. Chairman.
Senator, who? Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, first I'd like to offer Markey Amendment Number 1, which is co-led by my colleagues Senator Braun and Marshall. On March 29th, the FDA announced that the nasal spray naloxone, Narcan, would be available over the counter to help save people from opioid overdoses. It's a major and life-saving development, but the challenge remains that Narcan can only save lives if people can afford it. This amendment requires a GAO study on affordability and access of all forms of Narcan available by prescription and over-the-counter. The opioid epidemic is ravaging every community in the country with no regard to state lines or income levels, and today we are taking major steps forward to ensure life-saving medication is affordable and accessible for all Americans. This study will ensure that we continue that work, so I thank Senators Braun and Marshall and the majority and minority staff for their work on this amendment, and I urge its adoption.
Thank you. Further discussion on the Markey, Braun, Marshall?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Marshall.
I support this amendment and glad to partner with Senators Markey and Braun in introducing it. Fentanyl is currently the most dangerous drug threatening and facing Americans, and fatal overdoses are the fastest growing cause of death from adolescents to young adults. The CDC recently published an analysis finding a 182% increase in illicit fentanyl overdose deaths among 10 to 19-year-olds between 2019 and 21. Counterfeit prescription pills were present in nearly 25% of those deaths. All across Kansas, doctors, EMS personnel, sheriff, police have used it as a critical tool to prevent fatal overdose. In fact, they tell me it's being used dozens of times every day. They'll need Narcan to be accessible and affordable. I was proud to see the FDA step up to make Narcan more widely available over the counter, and we've been calling on the industry and agencies to do that for several years. This is new territory we're entering here, and I think this GAO report will fill in some of the gaps we're missing on access and affordability and where coverage comes in. I also hope this gets us thinking about other policies this committee must urgently address. Senator Markey and I have been talking about the reauthorization of vital programs established under the Support for Patients and Communities Act, some of which are set to expire this Congress. Again, I urge all my colleagues to support this and to also work with us reauthorizing some of these essential programs. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. Further discussion? Okay, moving on. Senator Murkowski.
Mr. Chairman, I call up Murkowski Amendment Number 1 as modified. This is an amendment that will establish an exemption process for patients or physicians in requesting an exception to step therapy protocol. Step therapy is one terminology for it. Others know it as fail-first protocols. This requires patients to try and fail on a lower-cost drug before they're allowed to access the drug that was actually prescribed by their physician. This has potential, as you would imagine, to harm patients. You have delayed access to the most effective treatments, sometimes with severe side effects, irreversible disease progression, certainly creates additional frustration for patients as they're seeking treatment. I think all of us have heard different stories from our constituents regarding step therapy and how they have just been frustrated and stymied by this process and in many cases, again, actually harmed. I have a situation that has prompted me to be engaged in this. This involved a young Alaskan child. He was required to fail on 2 drugs before his plan agreed to cover a newly approved drug that was very specific to his disease type. The newer drug they knew was going to deliver better results than the comparison studies, but they made him go through this protocol. He was finally granted the coverage for the innovative drug after about 6 months. But by that time, he'd already become so sick, he lost his colon. This boy was 11 years old, and he was forced to go through this process, a process that his doctor knew what he was taking was not going to be what he needed. So I think we can do better here, and the Safe Step Act actually helps us get there by providing a clear path for patients and physicians to request an exception. So it is something where we outline 5 exceptions to the first step protocols, and there have been some that have suggested that this will somehow increase costs. 36 states have already passed laws regarding step therapy reform. Experience with those laws have shown that step therapy reform has not affected costs in a negative way. So I would hope that each of my colleagues would support this amendment.
Thank you, Senator Murkowski. Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Marshall.
Go ahead. Well, I want to thank Senator Murkowski for leading on this. Literally just got off the phone with a Zoom conference of people in the rheumatology industry. Hundreds of people on the phone. Each one of them could tell dozens of stories of the impact of this same situation. What it's like to have traveled to 20 different doctors, finally found a medication that worked, and then suddenly you have someone that's never seen a patient with rheumatoid arthritis telling you you need to try something else first. This is long overdue. Like prior authorization, it's an important utilization management tool in our current fee-for-service world, but aspects of it do not make sense. In fact, it can be quite cruel. Throughout my career, I fought for patients to have access to the medication that would work best for them. Unfortunately, health plans often require patients to fail first on older medications before they try what their physician originally determined to be clinically best for them. Folks, it's the new world. Precision medicine is what's going to change the landscape and help us save Medicare. The process is painful and can cause irreversible damages to patients when they try these older medicines, especially if they already have severe condition. What's worse is when patients who are stable on their medications are forced to go through this fail-first policy. To be clear, our amendment is not taking away step therapy. Our amendment removes very damaging policies so patients can get on and stay on the treatment that works best for them. Certainly want to thank the group of senators leading this, Senator Murkowski, Hassan, Cassidy, Rosen, and others for all their tireless efforts. And I want to shout out to my friends on the other side of the Capitol here, Congress members Brad Winstrup, Raul Ruiz, Marinette Miller-Meeks, also for leading the charge over there. Thank you, and on behalf of all the patients this impacts, I yield back.
And Mr.
Thank you,
Chair,
Senator Marshall. Senator Hassan.
I just want to again thank Senator Murkowski for her leadership as Democratic co-sponsor here. This is a really important step, and I want to thank Senator Marshall as well. And just note that we all have constituents who this impacts. It impacts their health, as has been described. I will also just say it really impacts their capacity to earn a living sometimes, too. Yeah. In addition to their health, if they're not on the right medication, everything from staying home to make sure that you don't have a seizure at work while you're trying the less effective medicine, to not being able to work at all because your health never gets to where it needs to be. This is a really important provision to protect patients, and I'm really grateful to my co-sponsors.
Further discussion? Senator Cassidy.
I'll be brief, but I'll echo Senator Marshall. Thank Senator Murkowski, representing doctors and patients, particularly patients. I think this is a very good bill. And I'll also point out that there's enough savings in this legislation that it covers the cost of the legislation. So we wish to be fiscally responsible, and we cover this cost.
Thank you. Further discussion? Senator Murkowski's amendment would make life-saving prescription drugs more accessible to patients by making exceptions to step therapy in which patients must try one drug before they can try another more expensive drug. I want to thank Senator Murkowski for working with the committee to refine the language of the amendment, and I appreciate her willingness to continue to discuss additional changes. No patient should experience delays in getting the medicine they need to stay healthy and lead productive lives. I will support this amendment. Further discussion? Senator Cassidy?
I'd like to call up on his behalf Mullen Amendment 1 to S 1339. This would require group health plans and health insurance and issuers to make available to patients and providers health claims, network, and cost information to mobile applications through application program and interfaces, APIs. Senators Mullen and Senator Murray filed an amendment of S 1339 requiring commercial insurance plans to make claims data available to patients and providers via APIs. The CMS and ONC rules are requiring plans to share this claims data was an important step in giving patients access to their own health information and leveraging modern health tools so the patient could compare prices and move seamlessly between insurance plans. Expanding this requirement to commercial plans ensures no one is left out from controlling their own health decisions. I'm pleased to support this amendment.
Further discussion on Mullen Amendment Number 1, Mullen-Murray Amendment. Okay, let's move on.
Mr. Chairman.
Let me get to the Democratic side. Are there any amendments here? Okay. Senator Braun?
You got Markey.
Oh, Senator Markey, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now I'd like to offer Markey number 2, which is co-led by my colleagues, Senators Marshall and Kane. This amendment aims to solve a problem referred to as gag clauses employed by pharmacy benefit managers. And that sounds complex, but it's really pretty simple. A gag clause is yet another way that the healthcare industry limits information to patients about how much their healthcare costs. Our amendment promotes transparency so that patients can make more informed decisions about their care by giving them access to more data about the medical care they receive and the drugs that they use. So to explain it just a little bit more, health insurers provide patients with something called a consumer decision support tool, an online database they can use to compare costs and make decisions about their health care. So when a patient is wondering what their copay will be or how much a generic drug will cost versus the name brand, they often use these consumer decision support tools. But some PBMs include provisions in their contracts with health insurance companies that prohibit insurance companies from sharing pricing information in these customer decision support tools. This action is referred to as a gag clause. But when a doctor prescribes a medicine to a patient and the patient is looking at whether to get a generic or at what pharmacy they go to, their consumer support tool, the drug or the cost or pharmacy information could be missing if it's covered under one of these gag clauses. These gag clauses are just another term for censorship. This amendment will solve this problem by banning inclusion of these so-called gag clauses in contracts with health insurance companies. It shines a spotlight on the healthcare and pharmaceutical industry to improve transparency and guarantee that patients have all the information they need to make decisions about their health care. And just following up on what Senator Cassidy said earlier, yeah, there's no simple one-shot answer, but it's buckshot. And one of the most important things we can do is just give the consumer the ability to see all aspects of this so that they can make decisions for themselves. So I thank Senators Marshall and Kane for their efforts on this amendment, and I urge an aye vote from the committee.
Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry, who's that? Yes, Senator Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I think Senator Markey's brilliant. Those are great remarks. I appreciate your leadership. Senator Kane has been involved with this as well. I certainly want to pledge my support to this. Originally, it came in as Senate Bill 1374, the Patient Right to Shop Act, a bill we introduced along Senators Markey, Senators Grassley, and Senator Kane. In the 21st century, we should expect customers to have accurate information about their prescription drug benefits to make informed decisions. I'll give you an example. The Kansas State Benefits Health Plan produced nearly $67 million in savings for state employees. Other studies have shown that patients will switch to a lower-cost suggestion and increase their medication adherence. For something so successful, why isn't it everywhere? Well, I'll give you the answer. It's because PBMs continue to game the system by having anti-competitive and anti-consumer clauses in their contracts with health plans. Our amendment promotes consumer choice, it promotes innovation, and increases transparency by prohibiting blocking clauses. This builds on a law that we championed in 2018 with Senators Collins, Cassidy, and Stabenow, and others that banned pharmacy gag clauses. I appreciate the committee leadership and staff. I think it's a good time for me just to stop and recognize the staff here, Mr. Chairman. I've never been part of a situation where I thought our staff worked so hard, worked together, shared the same common goal. Your staff, your committee staff, ranking member staff as well, so thank you. We're very privileged to be involved with this process. It's not perfect, but this amendment will make it better. And again, I just want to pledge my support. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on Markey Marshall Kane number 2. Okay, it turns out
Mr.
that-
Chairman?
Let me just say this, that votes were just called on the floor. We will continue moving through debate on amendments while members vote on the floor if needed. We'll take a short recess to get all members back to the room to take our votes, but there is a vote on the floor. All right, is that the end of the discussion on
So
Markey?
we're going to recess now to go vote? Or
No, we're not. We're going to continue discussion. People can go off and come back. Any more on Markey 2? All right, Senator Braun, did you have an amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I call up my amendment number 4. This is about categorizing PBMs to where they'd have a fiduciary responsibility. I know that there's discussion that we're not quite ready for that, so this is very simple, and I think there should be full support for this. I would request that the Secretary of Labor conduct a study on the fiduciary duties of pharmacy benefit managers. I'm offering this as a compromise to having a vote on it in and of itself. This would simply, again, just instruct the Department of Labor to conduct a study so if we know that it makes sense. And I would urge my colleagues to vote in favor of it, and I hope the chair and ranking member would be for this common sense compromise as well.
Further discussion on the Braun amendment? I want to thank Senator Braun for offering this amendment.
Number 4.
It's important for PBMs to act in the best interest of the people they claim to serve. We need to carefully target legislation about how to make PBMs fiduciaries, and this report can inform us about the best path forward. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. Okay, Democratic side. We got all the Democratic, all right, we've got all the Democratic amendments, Republican amendments.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Marshall.
I would like to pull up Marshall Amendment number 3, PBMs as consultants. Mr. Chair, I'd like to offer this amendment co-leading with Senator Braun. The lack of transparency in the pharmacy supply chain is one of the largest drivers of prescription drug costs. I've learned that employers who provide health coverage to more than half of the United States population struggle to deliver comprehensive, affordable pharmacy benefits to their workers. This is because employers do not have the information needed to compare across different PBM service providers and adequately reassess the reasonableness of PBM compensation, which is their duty under ERISA. Our legislation requires PBMs to disclose information on prescription drugs spending by the plan and its beneficiaries, as well as rebates, discounts, and other remuneration received by the plan. It does not include any requirement that PBMs disclose how they'll be compensated. That's because PBMs already have to disclose their compensation to the plan sponsor. This was in the Lower Healthcare Costs Act, which was signed into law in December 2020 omnibus. But several of the largest PBMs have taken the position they are not subject to these requirements and are not complying. This amendment provides an easy solution to the problem by clarifying that PBMs are covered service providers under current law. It will ensure PBMs disclose compensation they receive directly and indirectly for the services they provide the health plan. I ask all my members to support this important amendment to reassert our congressional intent and shed light on the PBM's businesses practices. I yield back.
Further discussion on Marshall Braun as modified. Okay, I support Senator Marshall's amendment, and I want to thank her for working with the committee to refine the amendment. This amendment is intended to encourage reporting by PBMs on direct or indirect compensation they receive to employers and therefore make the system more transparent. I urge a yes vote on this amendment. Further amendments? Further amendments?
Mr. Chair?
Senator Marshall again, okay?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to pull up Marshall Amendment number 1 on delinking. I'd like to bring Amendment number 1. I'm co-leading with Senators Kane and Braun, and we've also been joined by Senators Tester and Capito on the standalone bill. Thanks to years of hearings, we now know that certain PBMs are greedy actors in the drug supply chain. They're some of the largest companies, as we learned yesterday, 3 of the top 12, and dwarf every other company in the healthcare industry with their insurance arm, pharmacies, clinics, and GPOs. So I would ask anybody, what is their value? They're middlemen who process claims. They don't make a single product. They don't make a patient better. They don't create miracle cures or breakthrough therapies or treat people with cancer. Congress is allowing PBMs to get compensated by charging fees assessed on the percent of the cost of medicine. These are perverse incentives that favor medicines with higher list prices. It means higher costs for patients at the pharmacy counter. It also means patients have fewer and higher cost choices when PBMs discriminate generic or lower price brand competitors. Based on the testimonies we heard yesterday, we know PBMs aren't telling the whole truth. They hide behind their market control, their vertical integration, and shell games. Our amendment delinks administrative fees paid to PBMs from the price of medicines and puts patients over profits. I, again, appreciate the work of this committee and so many of my colleagues for their work to rein in these abusive tactics. But this is it. We don't have more years of hearings. It's time to act. We don't need form another committee and pray about it. Delinking is the heart of the issue. You want to fix how insulin biosimilars get excluded from the formularies? Here it is. We drafted this amendment to not score. We're not saying PBMs can't get paid. They just can't get paid based off the value of someone else's innovation risk and decades-long work. I urge my colleagues to vote yes. Thank you, and I yield back.
Further discussion on Marshall Kane Braun Amendment number 1.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Kane.
I strongly support this amendment. I'm glad to work with my colleague from Kansas on it. I understand it's the pleasure of the chair and ranking to table the amendment for the circumstances that you described at the beginning of the hearing. I don't view the tabling motion as hostile because I've had conversations with both of you and know that you like the idea and want to continue to work on it with us. I'm going to vote to support the amendment because I'm a co-sponsor of it, but I also hope that we might be able to continue to work and get it in a position where, should we have this bill on the floor, when we have this bill on the floor, this one can come up as an amendment.
Okay, further discussion? Senator Cassidy.
I think it's pretty clear that moving towards a fee-based PBM system is a priority of mine, and I do think that this Reform Act is a first step. We guarantee the PBM can make a bona fide service fee, and we ensure that rebates and other fees move all the way to the plan sponsor. I appreciate Senator Marshall's work on this bill, especially as drug manufacturers have highlighted some of the perverse incentives driving their list price higher. Just yesterday, we heard from Sanofi that 84% of their gross sales is returned to the system in rebates and fees. These fees assessed by PBMs, by wholesalers, distributors, and all other actors in the systems are sometimes tagged to the list price, which creates an incentive to drive the list price higher. It is a percent of the list price, therefore drives the list price higher. That said, this does not yet have a score. And under our agreement, I cannot support the amendment today, but I look forward to working with Senators Marshall, Kane, Braun, and the chair on this idea beyond this committee markup.
Let me just say, I think this amendment is not only well-intended, I think it raises some really important issues that we've got to pursue. But as Senator Cassidy just indicated, based on the agreement that we made, it does not have a CBO score, and we have agreed not to vote on those types of amendments. So thank you, Senator Marshall, for offering this, and let's work forward. Let's go forward together, but at the appropriate time.
Mr. Chairman.
I'll vote to be tabling it. Yeah.
Just give me one more chance here, please. Respectfully, I'll share with you what the CBO told us. Given the complexity of the amendment, the team doesn't have the capacity to dig into it in more detail and accurately assess direction or magnitude of your prior to markup. That's what we were told. The CBO cannot score the bill on Arcanet's timetable. This was something that we feel like tabling this was negotiated behind closed doors and not with the members of this committee, respectfully. I don't think all of us here had the fair opportunity to advance our priorities, like CBO's answer to me. They're check boxes that have to be established that are beyond our control. Again, I think that this committee and the staff have done amazing things together, and I'm thankful for the bipartisan victories here. But this amendment and our standalone legislation, Senate Bill 1542, is among our very top priorities to accomplish this Congress. It's also a top priority for other committees. The Finance Committee, delinking is the first policy proposal in their legislative framework for their federal payer markets. I know I've been waiting for 6 years for this day, for this vote. Patients have been waiting longer. Community pharmacists even longer. We're losing community pharmacists every week in the state of Kansas. There are many, many senators here today that want to see our legislation advance, and I understand it's your privilege to table the amendment, but I would just like to hear from the ranking member and from the chairman your commitment that we've been heard and that we're going to give a fair opportunity for committee consideration and passage in the near future.
Brother, I support your amendment. It's just a process that, I made a big stink about the process. I can't unstink, if you're with me. And so I've got to kind of remain faithful to that agreement.
We use tomato juice back home when our dog was not. But go ahead.
All right, look, you know, it's not easy to move a bill forward, and agreements had to be made, and staff and Senator Cassidy and I worked hard. You raised important issues, and look, as I've said to you personally, and I'll say to everybody, this ain't the last markup we're having on these issues, period. It ain't. We're going to have more markups. Senator Collins.
Mr. Chairman, you keep making the point that this is not the last markup that we'll have on prescription drugs, but the fact is that Senator Marshall's amendment speaks directly to the issues that are before us in this bill, and his amendment is reinforced by the testimony that we heard yesterday. So it doesn't really fit in some subsequent bill. It is right on the money, literally.
Okay. I believe, Senator Marshall, you have another amendment. And that would be, as I understand it, the last amendments in this bill. And we could take a break, we could vote, come back, and do final passage.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Marshall.
I'd like to bring up Marshall Amendment Number 2, reinstating intent of patient assistance programs for children and families. This bipartisan amendment, the Help Copays Act, is a must-pass policy today. Again, brought up this morning in my conversation with the rheumatology group. We're in here in this committee trying to make real changes for patient cost, and we have an opportunity here today to stand up to the PBMs to bring relief to patients. As we all know, insurers and PBMs are one and the same. Vertical integration and their oligopolies have allowed them to increase patient costs to increase their own profits. One way they do this is through implementing copay accumulator programs. Insurers and PBMs learn which drugs have third-party patient assistance funding available to help patients pay for specialty medications that treat chronic and often rare conditions. And thank goodness for that innovation out there and these new miracle drugs that we do have to treat these folks. When a patient goes to the pharmacy to purchase the medicine their doctor prescribed, they may use the patient assistance funding to help them afford the medication. But unfortunately, the PBMs tell the insurers that the patient used this money, and the insurers won't let it count towards the patient's deductibles and out-of-pocket costs. So insurers and PBMs profit off the assistance meant to help patients, all while making patients pay higher out-of-pocket costs through increased deductibles and co-insurance. This amendment will still allow accumulator programs on medicines if there's a generic alternative. This is a critical lifeline that helps ensure our low-income patients and patients in need of financial assistance can get the medicines they need. This amendment will take this money back from the PBMs and allow the assistance to apply to patients to deductibles, a common-sense approach. I hope my colleagues support this bipartisan amendment, and certainly again want to recognize the leadership of my co-sponsor, Senator Kane, Senator Murkowski, Senator Markey, and Senator Mullen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Discussion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Senator Markey.
Mr. Chairman, I'm proud to co-sponsor the Help Copays Act and this amendment. Ultimately, the status quo policy leaves patients shouldering the cost that insurers are hoping to avoid and pass off through premiums, and patients with chronic illnesses like cystic fibrosis are disproportionately affected. That is unacceptable, and that's why I'm glad to be working with Senators Marshall and Kane on this bill and the amendment. And while we have some details to work through, I appreciate the concerns of the chairman and the ranking member. I do worry that a lot of patients out there who have so much on the line right now to see this markup as an opportunity to get things done. And so we appreciate the understanding between the chairman and the ranking member, but I want to continue to partner with Senator Marshall to ensure that we find a mechanism to give these protections to consumers. I think it's very, very important, and I thank Senator Marshall for doing that.
Further discussion? I thank Senator Marshall for offering this amendment. Unfortunately, I cannot support this amendment at this time. I strongly support the goal, obviously, of making medicines affordable, but I'm concerned that this legislation could have serious unintended consequences. It also does not have, as we've discussed before, a CBO score. Under the agreement that I made with the ranking member, Senator Cassidy, I will make a motion to table this amendment. All right, Senator Cassidy.
I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an article from two well-respected attorneys on the FDA bar providing more detail about the due process concerns with the Citizens Petitions Bill. However, I want to note on balance, I support the bill and the efforts of this committee to help address gamesmanship in the petition process. Then next, I'd like to specify for the record that Braun and Marshall amendments are as modified. So just to also specify that.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Could I make a suggestion? Since we have two votes, would it make sense to convene in the president's room to do the final votes rather than coming back here?
What do people think? Yeah. Make sense? Totally. All right, that's fine with me. All right, hold it. It's 11:20 now.
11:30 president.
What do you think? What time do you think?
11:30 in the president's room.
All right, 11:30 in the president's room.
Just a second, let me make the point. If we have the final vote at the Senate side, it's not televised or recorded. Is that correct?
Well, reserve it. All right, we're going to try to reserve the president's room, obviously.
But did you hear my concern?
No, I didn't.
That if we have it there, then it will not be televised, nor will it be recorded, which is, I gather, important.
Meet back here at 11:30.
But I don't know that we're going to, all right. All right, then if that's the case, sorry, I think it's a good idea. But, so let's meet back here. We're not going to make it at 11:30. Let's make it 11:40, okay?
Mr. Chair, just how about if we come back right after the second vote? Because let's go over and vote on vote one and then vote on vote two and come back. Because if we come right back and then the second vote starts, then we'll be pulled.
Where were we now? Is the first vote almost complete?
Yeah, the first vote has been open for 20 minutes. So if we go over and do both votes, but you think it's going to take.
All right, but the problem is sometimes these votes go on forever, as you know, Tim.
Okay, all right.
All right, 11:40, good? All right, thank you. We'll be back here at 11:40. Thank you. Okay. Committee will come to order. We will now move to votes, and I note the presence of a quorum. We will take votes in the order that we considered the bills and their amendments. We will complete votes for each bill and its amendments before moving to the next bill. We'll start with the vote on the final passage of S 1067, the Ensuring Timely Access to Generics Act of 2023. I now move to favorably adopt S 1067 as amended. Clerk will call the roll.
Senator Murray?
Aye.
Senator Casey? Senator Baldwin? Senator Murphy?
Aye by proxy.
Senator Kane? Senator Hassan? Senator Smith? Senator Lujan? Senator Hickenlooper?
Aye by proxy.
Senator Markey?
Aye by proxy.
Senator Cassidy?
Yes.
Senator Paul?
Yes by proxy.
Senator Collins? Senator Murkowski?
Yes by proxy.
Senator Braun?
Aye.
Senator Marshall?
Aye.
Senator Romney?
Aye.
Senator Tuberville?
Yes by proxy.
Senator Mullen?
Yes by proxy.
Senator Budd?
Yes by proxy.
Chairman Sanders?
Yes.
I have 21 ayes, 0 nays.
The ayes have it. The bill is agreed to and will be favorably reported as amendment. I ask unanimous consent that in preparing S 1067 as amendment, the staff be authorized to make any required technical and conforming changes. Without objection, so ordered. We will now move to Hassan Amendment, final passage of S 1114. We'll now move to Hassan Amendment 1 as modified to S 1114, which concerns FDA review of generic applications with respect to inactive ingredients. I intend to vote aye at the time. Clerk will call the roll.
Senator Murray?
Aye.
Senator Casey?
Aye.
Senator Baldwin? Senator Murphy?
Aye by proxy.
Senator Kane? Senator Hassan? Senator Smith? Senator Lujan? Senator Hickenlooper?
Aye by proxy.
Senator Markey?
Aye by proxy.
Senator Cassidy?
Aye.
Senator Paul?
Aye by proxy.
Senator Collins? Senator Murkowski? Senator Braun? Senator Marshall? Senator Romney? Senator Tuberville?
Yes by proxy.
Senator Mullen?
No by proxy.
Senator Budd?
Yes by proxy.
Chairman Sanders?
Aye.
I have 19 ayes, 2 nays.
The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. I now move to favorably adopt S 1114, the Expanding Access to Low-Cost Generics Act of 2023 as amendment. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Murray?
Aye.
Senator Casey? Senator Baldwin? Senator Murphy?
Aye by proxy.
Senator Kane? Senator Hassan? Senator Smith? Senator Lujan? Senator Hickenlooper?
Aye by proxy.
Senator Markey?
Aye by proxy.
Senator Cassidy?
Yes.
Senator Paul?
Yes by proxy.
Senator Collins?
Aye.
Senator Murkowski? Senator Braun? Senator Marshall? Senator Romney? Senator Tuberville?
Yes by proxy.
Senator Mullen?
No by proxy.
Senator Budd?
Yes by proxy.
Chairman Sanders?
Yes.
I have 20 ayes, 1 nay.
The ayes have it. The bill is agreed to and will be favorably reported as amendment. amended. I ask unanimous consent that in preparing S 1114 as amendment, the staff be authorized to make any required technical and conforming changes. Without objection, so ordered. We now move to favorably adopt S 1214, the RARE Act. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Murray? Senator Casey? Senator Baldwin? Senator Murphy?
Aye by proxy.
Senator Kane? Senator Hassan? Senator Smith? Senator Lujan? Senator Hickenlooper?
Aye by proxy.
Senator Markey?
Aye by proxy.
Senator Cassidy?
Yes.
Senator Paul?
Yes by proxy.
Senator Collins?
Aye.
Senator Murkowski? Senator Braun? Senator Marshall? Senator Romney? Senator Tuberville?
Yes by proxy.
Senator Mullen?
Yes by proxy.
Senator Budd?
Yes by proxy.
Chairman Sanders?
Yes.
I have 21 ayes, 0 nays.
We're now moving to final passage of S 1214. Oh, I'm sorry. The ayes have it. The bill is agreed to and will be favorably reported. I ask unanimous consent that in preparing S 1214, the staff will be authorized to make any required technical and conforming changes without objection, so ordered. Next, we have the Romney Amendment 2 to S 1339, which allows for an exception to the prohibition on spread pricing. I move to table this amendment, and I will vote yes. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
We received a CBO score, got the TA, all the TA involvement. Why it's being tabled, it's directly relevant to this bill. It relates to spread pricing, and I'm sure as to why it would be tabled. I also note for the record that Express Scripts, looking at because it was raised in testimony opposing this amendment, Express Scripts and their testimony said the ban on spread pricing may ultimately result in higher health care premiums. Therefore, we strongly caution against
Senator Romney,
banning this option.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but the debate is over. We're voting on the bill right now.
I understand,
That's the
but
process.
I had something to say, and as a
Okay.
senator, I'm entitled to that right.
You said it. Okay. The clerk will call the roll. Romney Amendment 2.
It's a procedural.
This is a procedural
This is
vote.
a table vote.
This is to table. Right. That's right. Motion to table. Romney.
And no comment as to why it's being tabled?
No,
It's non-debatable.
not debatable. As we discussed in the meeting, that's just the process.
But what's the process?
The motion to table is not debatable.
Okay, call the roll.
Senator Murray? Senator Casey? Senator Baldwin? Senator Murphy?
Aye by proxy.
Senator Kane? Senator Hassan? Senator Smith? Senator Lujan?
Aye by proxy.
Senator Hickenlooper? Senator Markey?
Aye by proxy.
Senator Cassidy?
I would first note that the motion to table
None.
being non-debatable, I think is a House rule. Although we know my position on this, I strongly support Senator Romney and his ability to comment. I just say that. But I support the motion to table.
Senator Paul?
He is, what's that? Hang on. No, I'm supporting the motion to table, correct? Yeah. Yeah, we don't believe it's a House rule. We think it was like not a rule, if I was unclear on that.
Sorry.
Senator Paul?
Paul is a no.
Senator Collins?
No.
Senator Murkowski?
Aye.
Senator Braun?
No?
Senator Marshall? No. Senator Romney? No. Senator Tuberville?
Yes, by proxy.
Senator Mullen,
No by proxy.
Senator Budd,
Yes by proxy.
Chairman Sanders.
Yes.
I have 15 ayes, 6 nays.
The ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Next, we have the Baldwin Amendment 1 as modified to S 1339.
Excuse me, could I have unanimous consent? Wait, my staff is telling me that I was looking at something incorrectly.
These were the votes on the amendment. We did not have votes for the senators you just read on the motion to table.
So you talk about, well, Paul is a no on the
motions
tabling,
to table.
but
Tuberville
Tuberville,
is
Mullen, and
silent.
Budd are all silent, so they are not voting on that.
Clerk, do you have that new information? Just tell them again.
It is Tuberville, Mullen, and Budd are silent on the motion to table. I'm sorry, Budd is a no on the motion to table.
And this,
As it will not affect the outcome of the vote.
as it will not affect the outcome of the vote, without objection.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Collins.
may I ask a procedural question for clarity? It was my understanding that the chairman was going to move to table any amendment that did not have a CBO score or TA. And from what I just heard from Senator Romney, he has both. Could you clarify? You obviously have the right to table for any reason, and I'm not challenging that, and I realize that a motion to table is not debatable. I'm just trying to square what you said.
Sure. Well, as you know, Senator Collins, bringing consensus to getting the 60 votes that we're eventually going to need is not easy. And I think what Senator Cassidy and I have agreed to is that at this point, that looks like a fatal amendment and will not allow us to do what we wanted to accomplish. That's the reason. Okay. Next, we have the Baldwin Amendment 1 as modified to S 1339 to require reporting regarding certain drug price increases. I will be voting yes on that amendment. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Murray,
Aye.
Senator Casey, Senator Baldwin, Senator Murphy,
Aye by proxy.
Senator Kane, Senator Hassan, Senator Smith, Senator Lujan,
Baldwin. Senator? Lujan is aye by proxy.
Senator Hickenlooper, Senator Markey,
Aye by proxy.
Senator Cassidy,
Baldwin Amendment 1.
Cassidy is yes.
Senator Paul,
Paul is no by proxy.
Senator Collins,
Aye.
Senator Murkowski, Senator Braun, Senator Marshall, Senator Romney, Senator Tuberville,
No by proxy.
Senator Mullen,
No by proxy.
Senator Budd,
No by proxy.
Chairman Sanders.
Aye.
I have 16 ayes, 5 nays.
The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Next, we have the Markey Amendment, number 1 to S 1339, to require a study on access to medication for opioid overdose reversal. I intend to vote yes.
Can we voice it?
All right. Okay, let's do a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we have the Murkowski Amendment 1, as modified to S 1339, on an exceptions process for medication step therapy protocol. I intend to vote yes. Clerk will call the roll.
Senator Murray,
Aye.
Senator Casey, Senator Baldwin, Senator Murphy,
Aye by proxy.
Aye by proxy, yeah.
Senator Kane, Senator Hassan, Senator Smith, Senator Lujan,
Aye by proxy.
Senator Hickenlooper, Senator Markey,
Aye by proxy.
Senator Cassidy,
Yes.
Senator Paul,
No by proxy.
Senator Collins,
Aye.
Senator Murkowski, Senator Braun, Senator Marshall, Senator Romney, Senator Tuberville,
Yes by proxy.
Senator Mullen,
Yes by proxy.
Senator Budd,
Yes by proxy.
Chairman Sanders.
Aye.
I have 20 ayes, 1 nay.
The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Next, we have the Mullen Amendment Number 1 to S 1339, offered by Mr. Cassidy, related to application programming interfaces. I intend to vote yes. Clerk will call the roll.
Mullen one as modified.
As modified? Yeah, this amendment is modified.
Senator Murray. Senator Casey. Senator Baldwin. Senator Murphy.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Kane. Senator Hassan. Senator Smith. Senator Lujan.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Hickenlooper. Senator Markey.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Cassidy.
Aye.
Senator Paul.
No by proxy.
Senator Collins.
Aye.
Senator Murkowski. Senator Braun. Senator Marshall. Senator Romney. Senator Tuberville.
Yes by proxy.
Senator Mullen.
Yes by proxy.
Senator Budd.
Yes by proxy.
Chairman Sanders.
Aye.
I have 20 ayes, 1 nay.
The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Next, we have Markey Amendment 2 to S 1339, related to consumer access to drug pricing information. I intend to vote yes. Clerk will call the roll. This could be a voice vote, I think. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it, good. Next, we have Braun Amendment 4 is modified to S 1339, requiring the Secretary of Labor to conduct a study on imposing fiduciary duties on PBMs. I intend to vote yes. Clerk will call the roll.
Senator Murray. Senator Casey. Senator Baldwin. Senator Murphy.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Kane. Senator Hassan. Senator Smith. Senator Lujan.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Hickenlooper. Senator Markey.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Cassidy.
Yes.
Senator Paul.
Yes by proxy.
Senator Collins.
Aye.
Senator Murkowski.
Aye.
Senator Braun. Senator Marshall. Senator Romney. Senator Tuberville.
Yes by proxy.
Senator Mullen.
Yes by proxy.
Senator Budd.
Yes by proxy.
Chairman Sanders.
Yes.
I have 21 ayes, 0 nays.
Ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Next, we have Marshall Amendment 3 as modified to S 1339 on disclosure requirements for PBMs and third-party administrators. I intend to vote yes. I think we can do a voice vote on this. All those in favor, please say
Well,
yes.
I have to say that Senator Paul, who's not here by proxy, would be a no.
Okay,
So I feel obliged to say that we should have a roll call on this.
okay, let's do a roll call vote.
Senator Murray.
I'm okay with that.
All right, Senator Paul is recorded as a no. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're up to final passage. We're now up to final passage of S 1339. I now move to favorably adopt S 1339, the Pharmacy Benefit Management Reform Act as amended. I intend to vote yes. The clerk will call the roll.
No, we're not. Senator Murray. Senator Casey. Senator Baldwin. Senator Murphy.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Kane. Senator Hassan. Senator Smith. Senator Lujan.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Hickenlooper. Senator Markey.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Cassidy.
Yes.
Senator Paul,
No by proxy.
Senator Collins,
Aye.
Senator Murkowski,
Aye.
Senator Braun.
Aye.
Senator Marshall. Senator Romney. Senator Tuberville,
No by proxy.
Senator Mullen,
Yes by proxy.
Senator Budd,
Yes by proxy.
Chairman Sanders.
Aye.
I have 18 ayes, 3 nays.
The ayes have it. The bill is agreed to and will be favorably reported as amended. I ask unanimous consent that preparing S. 1339 as amended, the staff be authorized to make any required technical and conforming changes without objection, so ordered. That concludes our business today, and I want to thank everybody, and especially the staff, for their very hard work. Committee stands adjourned.